ways, the pandemic has exposed or exacerbated even the stress fractures, I think, in the body politic. It's also highlighted the resiliency of the community of Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas. Very early on in the pandemic, we convened a collaborative call of the major institutions in Wyandotte County in order to bring the health department into direct conversation on a daily basis with those who were providing education and services, emergency management. And by doing that, we were able to, first of all, bring concerns from the community directly to me and to our administration, but also to the health department, and also for the health department to be able to provide the latest data and insight and research into the coronavirus. And it was interesting because it's been described as the novel coronavirus, and it is absolutely novel. And that every day we learn something more, and as the research continues on, we're gathering more and more information. I think what our hope is, I'm going to continue to say this, that this almost a dichotomy that we're seeing play out, and it really, frankly, it goes to the roots of the U.S. Constitution, personal freedom, and yet also a need to come together for the common good. And if people say, how can you, for instance, justify these the health orders when the Constitution provides for personal liberties? And so let's go back to the preamble. And we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure for ourselves and our posterity the blessings of liberty, do hereby ordain and establish these United States of America. So there's always that tension between personal freedom and what we allow and ask our government to do. And that showed up, obviously, in the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights, first 10 amendments to the Constitution were implemented, adopted, in order to ensure that personal liberty was secured over and against the tendency of government to grab more and more control. That's the tension, and the Constitution for over 200 years has really played that out. This is just one more example of that, I think. But I will say that I look at it this way: what is going to happen, what is happening with business, and I'm hearing this more and more now being said nationwide, but no matter what our health department might institute, no matter what the state government might do, and no matter what the federal government might do in terms of bringing restrictions, personally, people are restricting their own business activity. I know so many people who will say, well, I'm not going out to meet with you in a restaurant. I'm not going to a bar unless I can be outside. And people I hear from people who work in the stores. They're very concerned about customers who come in who are not masked up. My daughter works at a T-Mobile store in Wichita, and people will come in without the mask, and she feels as if you have to respect me as well. I have a right to not get the virus. So that's the tension, and I encourage people to use their personal freedom to neither get nor give the virus. If we would each simply take that and operate in such a way that I'm doing everything I can not to get the virus nor to give the virus, then we would be over this much sooner. I think it's interesting, obviously Taiwan being an island nation of 23 million, since Easter Sunday, they have had, I think, 430 cases of community spread. And just last week, they held a massive concert event that they were able to do maskless because they have about 7 or 8 cases of community spread per week. That's astounding, but what it is, it's also hopeful because it can be done. And I think in so many ways, we've been bargaining with the enemy. Well, if we just open up, a little bit more, then we can take. It's simply a question of just how much community spread we're willing to accept. And the more oxygen we give this, the more it spreads. And so now, unfortunately, we are averaging 100 new cases a day in Wyandotte County. And in April, after the stay at home, we were at 11. So that's 9 times the spread. And what that means is now our hospitals are having to defer elective surgeries. Elective surgeries, it's not a tummy tuck. It's not, a facelift. It is people who need surgery for a sports injury. It's people who need a surgery for a heart stent, people who need a procedure for cancer. These are the things that now KU Med is having to defer to make sure that they can handle the volume that is coming from COVID. So I would encourage you to continue to look into the research and see what is happening on this front. The more information we have, I think the more that the COVID, the way it moves and what it is and what we need to do presents itself to us, the more we can see it for what it is, and then we can make informed decisions. So I'm going to set that aside. Now, I hate to have to preface everything with COVID, but that's where we are. What I really want to talk about is really in spite of COVID, the tremendous success that we've seen in Wyandotte County in terms of business investment in our community. We are on tap to reach almost $1 billion in new investment in Kansas City, Kansas, in Wyandotte County in 2020. So just highlight some of the bigger projects. Obviously, the Urban Outfitters that will be located on land of the Speedway there at the south east corner of 110th and 118th and State Avenue, which would be catty-corner to the American Royal. That is a great project, and one of the things that impressed me most about that was the way in which they tried to help us solve community problems. And so, for instance, for them to be able to access workforce, we have workforce, especially in the eastern part of our city, but they need transportation. And so they worked with the state to try and come up with a transportation plan for workers. We also need to solve for childcare, that some of these folks need to take care of small children. They're working on a plan to provide childcare opportunities. They're also working with KCK Community College on educational opportunities. And the next thing, the other piece of that, and I've had conversations with Secretary of Commerce Poland about this, is beautiful affordable housing. And I conflate those to really describe those as sustainable neighborhoods. And I'll explain that a little bit more eventually. But so the Urban Outfitters is a great project. $18 an hour wages, significant improvement for so many of our community with benefits. And then, of course, if we solve for transportation and childcare, it's tremendous community benefits. We have the Amazon project there at the old Woodland site. That also is a good logistics jobs. We are looking at the development of Turner Diagonal. We are seeing the downtown. We're seeing the Willie Lanier project at the old Jack Reardon Center, the opening of the Merck grocery store. So a lot of good things happening throughout our community. And we believe, again, what that indicates is really confidence in the ability of Kansas City, Kansas to provide good location, good work, good services, good labor, and that we're going to continue to see this investment. And I really have to give kudos to Wyandotte Economic Development, Greg Kindle, to Catherine Carter, our Economic Development Director, and Doug Bach, and to Unified Government Commission for working together to try and continue to bring these kinds of projects. Would be remiss if I did not mention the new Menard store out west and the new Menard store that is proposed and planted for 18th and I-35. Those projects will help us tremendously in terms of generating revenue. So I've often said that we could have the Legends double, triple in size and really become an even bigger draw for tourists. But if and generate additional revenues for the county and do all those things. But if the revenues generated and this development does not improve the quality of life for our residents, we're missing the point. We have to find a way to improve quality of life. That means more and better services and reduced tax burden. And what I'm going to do today is kind of run you through a presentation that I developed that I was taking out to the neighborhoods before COVID, was able to have 2 different community meetings, just kind of going through this presentation to explain currently where we are in terms of revenues at the UG and the kinds of strategies we have in place to grow the tax base. But then also to focus in on, well, how do we then continue to grow those parts of our city that have been hollowed out over time? So I keep describing this, really talking about growth from our neighborhoods up. There's the big development, Turner Diagonal, Urban Outfitters, Amazon, those are great projects. Let's also focus in on, and we're going to continue to do those, let's also focus in on neighborhoods. So Caitlin, next slide. Because neighborhoods are the heart of Kansas City, Kansas. These are, you can see the outlines of the neighborhood groups throughout the county, the city actually. And what this says is these are residents who have come together to organize to really focus in on crime and blight and services they need in their neighborhood. And so I try to reach out to these neighborhood groups as often as possible. And when I meet with neighborhood groups or I meet residents anywhere, I hear 2 things. The first is, Mayor, we need more work on our streets. Mayor, we need more police presence. Mayor, we need better stormwater infrastructure. Mayor, we need more services, programming for our youth. And I will reply, you're right. There's no doubt we need those things. Then they'll say, we need you to lower our taxes. And again, here we are. That's the problem. If any business, you want to provide more services, create more product, you have to invest in that. So it takes money to make money. It takes investment in neighborhoods to improve neighborhoods. There's no way around it. That's just a fundamental of it. So the problem is those 2 things seem to work in opposite directions. That if you raise taxes, then you actually drive out investment. And if you don't provide investment, then you're going to force property values down because the quality will decline and be less attractive. And so the value of the city will decline, and therefore you have fewer and less valuation that you can impose a mill levy on to generate the revenues necessary. The answer then is not by just increasing taxes and not just improving services. You've got to really seek to, decrease taxes and improve service at the same time. And that, of course, requires revenues. Next slide, please. I'm convinced quality of life enhancements will grow our neighborhoods and yield a fiscally strong and sustainable future. When you ask people, folks, even, some of you on the line, if you live in other jurisdictions, if you live in Johnson County, you live there because of the appearance of your neighborhoods, the quality of schools. And because of that, the valuations of your property are higher. And for instance, in the case of Overland Park, 1/3 of your city revenues come from Oak Park Mall, right? You have the people who have the disposable income who can afford to shop. And when they shop, they generate the revenues, and that allows Overland Park to keep their mill levy lower. Interestingly enough, if Kansas City, Kansas did not have the debt level it has, we would be able to reduce, had no debt, we would be able to reduce the mill levy by 17 mills. 17 of our current mills go to pay for debt servicing, paying off debt. So quality of life enhancements will grow our neighborhoods. If you take care of neighborhoods, if you do the things, it makes them attractive. People want to live there. And as people live there, they will drive up the values, and they will be there and able to shop in businesses and generate sales tax and consume BPU services, which also generates pilot revenue. Next slide. So here's where we are. This is the crossroads. How do we create better services and infrastructure and take care of those tremendous needs we have for infrastructure, and at the same time balance that against the revenue sources? And the simple way, obviously, is growth and development, broadens the tax base. I always love Tony Privatera's statement, sales solves all problems. And so our sales really is the value of our land. And if we can broaden the tax base, then we can generate the revenues for better services and infrastructure, and also take the pressure off of property taxes. Next slide. If we've asked the community on a regular basis every 2 years, we do a survey of neighbors. This was actually, we got almost 5,000 respondents this past year. And what you'll see is the neighborhood. What are the people saying? The people say, hey, we need our streets maintained better. We need more police presence. We need better communication with the public. And I've got to double, second that, third that, fourth that. We need better communication with the public. We want more, better code enforcement, better trash collection and recycling, and we have to take care of our stormwater runoff and management system. I receive calls, and my office receives calls daily on probably each one of these topics. And the hardest thing for me or my staff to tell people is, right, we know you've got a problem on your street. It's in line, but it's not going to be in line for 2 years. That's a hard thing to tell a resident who's looking out on his street, seeing potholes that he has to run over every day. When you talk about code enforcement, it's hard to tell. We've been working one code enforcement case for 2 years. I'm convinced, in fact, I'm almost certain that it's a house of meth heads who are scrapping out of their house. And there's only so much we can do until finally we decided to search all of our statutes, and we're able to declare it a public nuisance. And we had to send a crane out to the house last Friday, to use that to clear out the backyard of the scrap metal that was extraneous to owning a home. It was clear they were scrapping out. All the neighbors, we've got videos of them doing it, but there wasn't anything in our ordinance specifically that targeted that. We've had people move out of the neighborhood and then not be able to sell the house because of what they're looking out on. That's unacceptable. And so we are doing everything we can to create more and better enforcement and bring whatever kind of ordinances and even state legislation necessary to push back on that problem. Next slide. And so if you ask people, though, what they're satisfied with cleanup of junk, trash, and debris. They're at 42%. And what this shows is the improvement from 2016 to 2020. So we made progress. Mowing and trimming of weeds on vacant property went from 28% to 40%. That was due to an increase in the amount of money we spent on blight remediation, on the SOAR program. And that $1.7 million a year that we're using for this, paying $10,000 to $20,000 to take down dilapidated structures, mowing the lots in our land bank property 6 times a year. That money came out of the development at the Legends. The $12 million a year in money in sales tax revenue that comes off the Legends, 7.2 million of that went to mill levy reduction, a 6 mil reduction from 44 to 38 mills, but also 1.7 million is going into blight remediation. We're getting people to remove inoperable junk cars and better maintenance of residential properties. I do notice a difference, but that required investment of resources. And because we grew the tax revenues at the Legends, we had the revenues to do that with, and also to reduce the tax levy. Next. Then if you ask people what we should work on, it comes back the same. Cleanup of junk, trash, and debris citywide, mowing and trimming of weeds on private and vacant property, cleanup of junk and trash in neighborhoods, maintenance of residential property. We're seeing improvement. All right, now what do we need to work on? The same stuff and more, right? And so we're launching, and I'm doing this thing. It's kind of funny, but I don't know if you remember what a flash mob was. They were popular, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years ago, where people would show up at a place and everybody would dance together. It was just kind of a flash mob. Well, we're calling it a flash trash mob. So next Tuesday, we're going to the 10th in Minnesota, there where CVS and Security Bank are. And anybody who wants to show up and help, we're going to walk the streets and pick up trash. CVS is on board, Security Bank is on board, the Cashin brothers who own now property there on Minnesota Avenue are on board, and we're going to pick up trash, because when you do that, people begin to expect the city to look clean. Next. We're trying to address illegal dumping and littering, so much so now that we offer a reward. If you find someone dumping illegally and you get their license plate number and we can prosecute them, and we had prosecutions this year, you're going to get a reward, because this is absolutely unacceptable. There's a spot over by me, just off of I-635, a frontage road, and it's constantly being dumped on because there's no one who lives right there. It's a little industrial park, so people can drive in there, dump it, and move on. So we have to show that we care for the city, because if we don't care for the city, why should businesses and residents? Next. We've been doing a better job of enforcing neighborhood standards through abating problem properties. We actually don't, we have one abatement team that can go out and do a really good cleanup on a lot that may have debris on it, may have a dilapidated house. And we were budgeted to bring on a second abatement team to be much more aggressive. But then because of COVID, we had to cut the budget, and that second team did not come into play. So we're hoping that next year we can come on with a second property abatement team, but that's going to be dependent upon revenues. And we are increasing fines on code offenses. One of the things that we were clear, it was an odd kind of thing that if you carried on fines throughout the year from your code offenses, if you just waited till the change of the year, the others would be wiped away and you have to start over again. Well, that just didn't make any sense. People gamed that system. So we said, nope, these continue on. I don't understand how that ever continued on the books, but it did. And now we also implemented a vacant property registry so that we know where, if a property is a problem, who to get in contact with to make sure that they take care of it. Whether you live here or not, whether you live in California or in KCK, if you have a property, you need to take care of it. Next. We've done a better job of demolishing dangerous buildings. That's important, as you'll see in a little bit. We've cleared our backlog back to 2012, and that has an effect. You know, just think if you're that neighbor on the second picture, what it must, his experience of his neighborhood now must be, because that structure is now gone. Next. We simple investments, repairing potholes in streets. This particular vehicle is a hot patch, and it only uses the amount, it creates only the amount of asphalt needed for that patch job. And so it saves a lot of money in wasted asphalt. We were able to use 36% more asphalt. And just in 2020, early on, we patched 9,000 potholes. And people do notice that. I get comments from people that, gosh, it seems like our roads are better. You know, I drive Ward Parkway sometimes and I wonder, I don't know why they can't get Ward Parkway right. You know, that left lane of Ward Parkway going north and south, it's a axle buster. Next. But this is where we are. If you look at what we project in terms of our revenues and what our funding needs are, there's a big delta. And that can be made up with taxes, but that would only work for so long until people would say the taxes are even higher. There's no way I'm doing that. But at the same time, if we don't invest in the necessary improvements, then we're also not going to attract investment. Next. Now, we have made progress again on the city mill rate. This is only the city mill rate, and it's not the city bond mill rate. That's something separate. But we have gone from 44 mills in 2016 to 38 mills. And now we are at 14th, rather than being the highest mill rate in the state of Kansas, among the top 25 first-class cities. We are now ranked 14th. That's a good story to tell, but there's more to do. Next. I always have to explain, I will hear this from residents often, that we give everything away in incentives, right? That we give everything away. Well, no, we don't. We use incentives to create growth where it would not have happened otherwise. This is, if you look at the small circle on the left, in 2003, the property that is now occupied by Legends and Village West generated about $213,000 total in sales and property tax. The only business I think out there was the Kentucky Fried Chicken and a liquor store next door. That was it. Then so when the Legends was built, when the Speedway came in, and then we took advantage of that development to create the Legends master development plan, you see the vast difference. I talked to Dennis Hayes, who was the county administrator, city administrator at the time that this project came into play, and said that the city was in desperate straits at that point. Had it not been for the Legends, he's not sure whether we might not have ended up in default. But go back, sorry. Yeah, so what you can see is just a tremendous improvement in revenue position, 24.2 million in property taxes, 12 million in sales tax. And as I said, that 12 million in sales tax, 7.2 million of that went to mill levy reduction, and $1.7 million went to blight remediation, cleaning up the properties, taking care of the properties that the city owns. Thanks. Next. They also, folks, residents do not understand, for instance, how industrial revenue bonds work. And that's one of our important tools for our development. We just approved last night, I think, another $100 million industrial revenue bond for PQ Corporation, which is in the Armourdale district, which makes chemicals for household products. And when this first came up a year ago, there were residents complaining that we were giving away $100 million. And it's very difficult to explain that, no, we are financing this through the bonds, issuing the bonds, and it's only on the improvements, that the expansion that they're doing there. And that expansion is going to mean more jobs, and ultimately it's going to mean more tax revenues. And so this graph I use to explain that as current IRBs expire, it's going to create even more, bring more revenues into our tax roll, which again takes the pressure off. So these are decisions made by previous administrations and commissions to issue the IRBs. And as those expire, this is bringing on more tax revenues to us. That's why we do IRBs. It's not a giveaway. It's simply a way to leverage more growth. Next slide. And so we're doing a deal. We did a deal with Scavuzzo's. You may be familiar with Scavuzzo's. They're a longtime KCK company. They are trying to be, or working to position themselves to be a more national player in food supply and restaurant supply. And this is the old Indian Springs Park. You know, I have questions about the amount of money that the unified government has poured into that site over the years. I think we're at 25 million over time. So what's done is done, but to have a quality developer come in with a quality project is key for us. And so There will be pad sites that will be amenities for residents. There'll be some office space, and there'll be some co-location of businesses that will be servicing Scavuzzo's. They are, as you can imagine, COVID has affected their business, but they are still positioned to launch that project. Next. The Turner Diagonal, this is a very helpful, when we got the infrastructure approval from a federal grant through the work of Senator Roberts and Congressman Yoder, this change in the interchange there, Turner Diagonal, then opened up the property to the northeast of the diagonal for development. If you drive by there, you can see how quickly those buildings are going up. Again, more logistics, more jobs, close to where the jobs need to be, accessible, and ultimately will generate more revenues for us. Next. The American Royal, they've got the land, obviously. They've got a beautiful plan. COVID has affected that as well. Spoke with Cliff Illig at a Sporting KC game, and he said, yeah, the money people are bunkered in for COVID. And so they're not able to get out and do that right now. They're moving on it, but I would say it's in pause right now. But again, fundamentally a good quality project. This rendering kind of shows to the right there is a hotel that they want to build themselves. And then they will also have on the left, as you see there, will be meeting space, convention space. Next. This is the Menards. That's my bald head at the center. And, the Menards, now I will say that the Menards revenue, we agreed that sales tax revenue will now be folded into a new project that is not highlighted here, and that's Homefield. So at the old Schlitterbahn site, two developers, Rob Heineman and others, have a project which would include tournament facilities, indoor athletic facilities, training, sports medicine. There'll be outdoor ball fields, baseball fields. There'll be coaching. It's a regional draw, and other kinds of things, including what is called a crystal lagoon, which I think will be about a 5-acre pond of clean water. It'll be basically a very large swimming pool, and there'll be hotels and perhaps apartments and shopping located around the crystal lagoon. So it'll be a little kind of resort feel to it. This is actually something that was presented to us, to me anyway, about 3 years ago, that was looking more towards out by the American Royal property. There have been several of these built across the country. It's a great amenity. Next. But the property, the sales tax from that will fold into the sales bond, the STAR bonds for the Homefield project. So that's all good. What do we do now with those parts of town that have been hollowed out? And this is a map of redlining. And redlining, as you may know, was instituted during the Depression by the Roosevelt administration, basically as a way to ensure against great losses by banks and other lending institutions, to try and identify those neighborhoods, those areas where it would be a good place to invest and places that would be very risky to invest. But what they did is they graded, and if you had a first grade, you can see Johnson County, even in the 30s, was first grade. Second grade, third grade, now you're moving into Wyandotte County, and fourth grade, and that's most of Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas at the time. What that meant was, if you were a home mortgage lender or a bank, and you wanted to get a loan to build a house or add on to a house, you had a hard time getting that. What that meant was the housing stock declined. So then they would devolve into rental housing, which more or less were cared for. You still had to borrow money to fix those up. And if you didn't get the money, you just let the thing decline. That was long before rental licensing, where we required inspections of rental properties. So if you now, next slide, overlay this map on our current vacancies, you can see it's almost a one-to-one. These, the brown areas are vacant lots. That's a hole in the tax base. That's a hole in sales tax. That's a hole in property taxes. That's a hole in pilot revenues. It's a hole in revenues for the BPU. It's a hole in customers that would consume products of people like small woodlots. This is a if not the fundamental problem facing Wyandotte County, it's at least a close second. I don't know what the first would be, except the great need for improvement to our infrastructure. But if we don't solve for this, we won't have the money for the infrastructure. Next slide. Clearly, if you have a vacant lot, the average tax roll, and this is not even, if it's in the land bank, we're not getting any taxes on it. We own it outright, and we're paying to have those lots cut 6 times a year. The average vacant lot pays $15 a year annually. A new home on that, this is based upon what CHWC and others have done, brings in $1,774. Next slide. We bring occupied lots, obviously generate 40 times as much revenue. Next slide. If we were able to fill in, and this is just one segment, there was a little box showing this segment of property. This is just one piece of the city. If we filled in all the vacant lots in this area, that's 12.4 million in appraised value. I think, and really these are houses appraised, I think we would say like a 200,000 value, because you almost can't build a house for less than that. One single lot build would replace 22 vacant lots in value. Next slide. 115 vacant lots generates the same revenue as one home. Next slide. Strawberry Hill, which continues to see, it's amazing to me how the values in Strawberry Hill just continue to climb. In fact, if you look at the improvement in assessed value, residential assessed value across the 8 commission districts in Kansas City, Kansas, Wyandotte County, the average was 6.5% increase in assessed value. In District 2, which includes Strawberry Hill on the east, all the way out to 18th Street, State Avenue, south into Armourdale to the river, that had an 11.5% improvement in assessed property value for residential, which indicates to us that there is a demand for affordable housing that is still viable. And so people are looking for the housing at their price point. They're not able to find it elsewhere. They're finding it in these neighborhoods, and that is actually bidding up the value, the assessed value of the properties in District 2. If we, in Strawberry Hill, we could build out those 61 homes, we would increase the taxes from that to 172,000. And would also increase population, but there's no addition to infrastructure costs because power and water and sewer run right by those properties already. Next slide. When you don't have an occupied lot, having a vacant lot, no matter how nice your home is, decreases the value of your property by 6.5%, which again affects your ability to borrow, take a cash out refinance to put on a new roof or replace your windows, bring in better insulation, replace your, improve your foundation. It just makes it more difficult. And if you can see where the what this would mean for us, next slide. We actually have seen improvement. So these are the new remodels. People are bidding up what's available. People are looking for affordable housing. They're finding it, and they are doing remodels, and this is helping us. But we still have a lot of vacant lots to fill. But the fact that people are going and building, taking these houses and being able to flip them and sell them and still make a profit is a great sign to us. And it's something that we have to use as a signal that the market is telling us, and let the market move us even further along that road. Next. We have a program within the unified government. When we come across a house like the one on top, we send our engineers in to evaluate structurally whether it's sound. Is there termite damage? Is there, is there was a leaky roof and rotted out the interior of the house? If it's structurally sound, we try to get that to a rehabber. We have a list of 150 remodelers who will come in and pick up those properties. That's a great sign. And so this is actually old data. I think we're up closer to 80 houses rehab now. And that's, but what we have is before the rehab, those houses were worth 1.1 million, of an average of 20,000. We've almost quadrupled the value of those homes. And again, that's still an affordable price point for so many of our working families. Next. Here's the other side of blight. It's not just that it looks bad. It's not just that it discourages neighbors. It discourages investment. This is a study out of Philadelphia. Now, we're not maybe comparing apples to apples, KCK to Philadelphia, but at least in Philadelphia, there's a 39% reduction in gun violence around abandoned buildings that have been remediated. And if you remediate a lot, even if you go into a lot that's overgrown and filled with trash and debris, if our abatement team goes in there, cuts the grass, takes out the debris, clears out the brush, we could see an improvement. Otherwise, it causes a reduction in, there's a 5% reduction in violent crimes just around remediated lots, vacant lots. Next. This is increasing property values. This is a good sign for us. Again, you can see that heavy concentration of blue going up to the white line, going across there. That's the area I'm talking about, District 2. So people need affordable housing. They're looking for it. They're finding properties that might only be on the market for $20,000 or $30,000 or $40,000, but they're coming in and they're actually doing remediation to those, and that's improving neighborhoods. I see that every time I drive to church on Sundays through Argentine. The houses, when I was growing up in Argentine, the houses on the east side of town was the Mexican side of town. The west side was the Anglo side. After 1980s or so, the whites that I grew up with began to die out, began to move away. The housing stock declined. I came back to Kansas City, Kansas in the early 90s and began to notice that those bungalows, a lot of which were built by my great uncle, and my great grandfather was a developer there back in the 1890s. Those bungalows are in much better shape now than they were just 30 years ago, frankly, because of the immigration. They come in, they put their sweat equity into it, and the neighborhood looks as good now as it did as when I was a kid. Next slide. This is an interesting thing. One of the things I'm trying to drive to is the incremental growth that this development that's happening out west is awesome. We love having a Walmart there. Not all the residents do, but it's produces revenue. It's a need by the community. This is how people shop, right? They don't go to Minnesota Avenue 1950 anymore. That's not what's available. They go to a Walmart where they can get everything in one spot and go next door to the Kohl's. But if you look at from the city side, what does this do for our revenues, for our financial position, which ultimately is the financial position for each resident business in terms of the tax burden? The Speedway at the Walmart generates $147,000 per acre taxable. And market value is $589,000 per acre market value. So the amount of energy we put into developing something like the Legends, this is what it generates for us. And this is an opportunity cost. You know, if we do this and don't spend energy elsewhere, what does this mean for us? This is what we get. This is what it generates. And of course, the infrastructure for this is massive. And that's why we do the incentives, and that's why we do the tax abatement, all those things. But there are other ways to develop that traditionally have been very successful. Next slide. So if you comparison the Speedway Walmart, taxable value per acre, $147,000. The most profitable for the city, the most valuable piece of property in the city is Ray's downtown styling at $607,000 per acre, right? If you can bring that kind of density, it generates more revenues for the city and spreads out that tax burden even better. Now, what's going to take for, you can see that's where the Huron building used to be. My dad's office used to be in that building. What would it take? Now we have the transit center there. What would it take to get another building built there? Well, it's going to take residents. It's going to take people either officing downtown or living close to downtown. That would cause someone to say, I can build a building next to that and generate enough revenue to survive. Even the downtown McDonald's produces $170,000 per acre. Now, to me, this is not an either or. It's not, okay, well, let's just only do density infill. It's not about that. It's about doing both and. You have to meet the market where it is. But there is a market for this. Next slide. And, well, that's it. So my argument here is, if we're going to grow our city, we've got to improve the quality of life in our neighborhoods. And in order to do that, we have to make strategic catalytic investments and improvements in the quality of life, so that when someone builds a home here, takes up residence here, they feel, and their kids feel, and their grandkids feel that this is a great place to live and a great place to continue to invest myself, my family, my own money. Until we can demonstrate that on a consistent basis, we're going to continue to suffer from flight. But the fundamental dynamics of the market show that if you invest in your parks, if you invest in your streets, in your stormwater, if you continue to try and bring infill housing, you're going to bring that density, you're going to bring customers, you're going to bring new businesses, you're going to support small businesses. All that will take place insofar as you invest in those neighborhoods. The bottom line is, we cannot continue to support this hole in our tax base. It's unsustainable. It continues to burden us. And unless we have a real strategy and make moves on that strategy, we're going to continue to suffer from a deficit. So that's where I am. This is the message I try to get out to the residents. We have to grow our economy. We have to find a way to reduce taxes. We have to find a way to bring better services, better roads. We have to find a way to continue to grow economic development. This is why we use economic development incentives like tax abatement, TIF projects, CIDs, IRBs. That's why we do it, and they do work. Over time, they do work. And again, I want to give tremendous credit to the great work that's been done by our economic development team, Catherine Carter and Doug Bach, to our commission, to Greg Kindle, and really to the chamber for continually engaging the conversation and promoting Wyandotte County. And we want to have a place that we can showcase, and people will come through and say, I want to be a part of this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Really appreciate your comments. We're coming up on the hour, but if you're okay with taking a few questions, I would like to open it up to the floor. Rules for asking questions, please announce your name and your company before asking your question. Floor is open. Mr. Vaught, we knew
There's
that was
Joe,
coming.
yeah.
Mayor, I have probably a number of questions, but I know we're limited on time. I've asked this question several times to other speakers, but I haven't had a chance to ask you. As you know, I'm a real estate broker. Have been highly involved in the real estate business for the last 20 years. I'm a commercial real estate broker, but I always ask my fellow residential brokers, we have a lot of homes for sale in Wyandotte County. Why isn't there more activity? I'm talking about Johnson County brokers that actually, our homes are nice. They're less costly. But the biggest reason, and that's something I know you can't control, but there's two reasons. One is always that I hear is our schools. We're not going to send our children to USD 500. USD 500 spends an enormous amount of money, but we're still in the same position, which is basically last. And the other is taxes. If we hope to fill in these spots that you showed on the map, we got to cure that, and we're not doing it. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's the education is key. You know, it's interesting to me that if people knew that, okay, let's say you're a professional, right, and you have very concerned about your kids' education, the quality of the education up through elementary schools is fairly good. It's when they get to high school, middle school, and high school that it really drops off. And yet, if your kid is worked hard and can test, he gets into Sunder, which consistently ranks in the top 50 high schools in the nation. And that story doesn't get out. Now, the question is, well, why doesn't that story get out? I don't know. It's like a hidden secret. But in the terms of the taxes, again, I get it. That's the problem. As long as we have the mill levy where it is, it's going to continue to burden. So this is why we had this discussion, for instance, when we have an opportunity to make better use of our resources, we've got to find a way to do that. We have to make some of those hard decisions. We had this discussion over the summer about the Fairfax fire station. And I get it. I would love to have a fire station right there next to General Motors. But when the fire chief comes and says, we believe we can handle this from existing resources and relocate that company, well, we got pushback on this, as you know, and I get it. I understand. If I'm a business owner in Fairfax, I'm concerned now that truck has got to come further, might have to cross railroad tracks. I get it. But these are all prudential judgments that have to be made. And if we're going to get anywhere, we've got to find a way to continue to reduce that mill levy. So there's no disagreement for me.
Anyone else have a question?
Daniel, I don't have a question, but I'd like to make a remark if I could, or two.
Sure thing, Chris, and then I think I saw Leo is next with his question. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Carroll.
Mayor, hi, Chris Carroll with AT&T's External Affairs here in Kansas City. As you pointed out earlier in your remarks, this has been quite an extraordinarily difficult year for all of us, but especially for you guys, those in government and healthcare who've had to manage this COVID mess, if you will. It hasn't been easy, I know, but I personally think you guys and your commissioners have done a pretty fair job, really a remarkable job, your public health advisor, in addressing this crisis. And I think you guys should be proud of those efforts. AT&T's Believe Kansas City initiative has worked closely, Mayor, with mental health professionals in the community who've also experienced challenges this year due to COVID. And I recently reached out to many of these mental health organizations with an offer to provide some personal protection equipment in the way of face coverings, vinyl gloves, hand sanitizer, and the like. And as AT&T's representative to your community in Wyandotte County, I'm proud today to make that same offer available to you if you'd like it. And you and your health professionals with a gift of as much as $20,000, Mayor, in PPE equipment to be used in your community as you deem best. With the recent spikes in coronavirus cases, I'd like to get this order in by Thanksgiving, if at all possible, so that we could have it delivered by the end of the year. So if you're interested in this, I could maybe you assign me a designate on your staff that I could work with to finalize the PPE order. That would be appreciated, Mayor.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Chris. That is very appreciated. And I would just ask, just email me at dalvey@wycokck.org. And I will send you over to Matt May, who is our emergency management director.
Okay.
DALVEY@wycokck.org.
I've got that email, and I'll shoot that over to you this afternoon. I noticed, I don't know if he's dropped off, but Randy Kallstrom from Wyandotte Behavioral Health was on a little bit ago. I reached out to Randy about a week ago, and Randy, if you're still on, that offer still stands with you. We're working with Mental Health America of the Heartland, Susan, and some others in the community with PPE, and we'd like to include that all in this one big order, Mayor, for your community.
Thank you, Chris.
You bet.
Next question from Mr. Leo Prieto.
Hey, Mayor, great to hear your presentation. I'm glad I was privy to it. As a recent Strawberry Hill and KCK resident, I just moved in a couple months ago. I love the Merck. I love living across from Merck and the KU Med. But this is a specific question, I guess, if I missed the beginning of this presentation. What have I have noticed that we have a homeless population. Is there something that's being done to kind of curb that homeless population and also to help seek mental health services and so forth? And also the gas station on the corner. I know it's very specific, but are there any plans for that gas station with all the new recent development right across the street from me?
Right. So yeah, for the homeless, I will say that that was early on in our collaborative call in COVID. A lot of the resources came together, especially through Avenue of Life and other agencies that really focused in on that. So Avenue of Life has done a great job trying to reach out to the homeless and others. But again, I think the number of homeless probably is increasing. I don't have any stats on that, but I would assume it's increasing because some folks have lost their jobs, especially those who were, hourly wage and so forth. And for that gas station, I'm trying to find a small nuclear device that could be deployed there, but unless maybe someone at the chamber might have one, let me know, and we'll just surreptitiously deliver it there.
Okay, all right. But I'm glad to be back in Kansas, man. Thank you.
Thank you.
We've got time for about one or two more questions, if there are any out there.
Can I ask?
Mr. Khan, go ahead.
Hi, Mayor. This is Khan with Khan Petroleum, and I had a quick question regarding, we are in essential business, and the customers, this mask, that it's mandatory now, but we are having a lot of struggle with that. What would be a good reasonable advice on your end that we can handle those kind of situations?
That's interesting. This summer, I have a fireworks tent that we use and raise money for things, but the mask mandate went in a day after we had opened. And so when people came in to the tent, we'd say, you have to wear a mask. And only one person made a deal out of it, and he said, I'm taking my business elsewhere. And I said, well, that's good. That's fine. I'm okay with that. But everybody else was fairly compliant. And so I think what I say to people is, look, my employees deserve to be protected. When you wear a mask, you're protecting my employees. I expect you to help me respect my employees. You don't want your employees contracting the virus from someone who may come in. The virus, the mask does not stop all transmission of the virus. It simply reduces the likelihood. And if people would just accept that. I don't know what, my motto is now this, especially over the holidays, the best gift we can give, neither get nor give the virus. If each one of us would act in that way, the government would not have to be that involved. That would be the ideal. If we would use our personal freedom to protect ourselves and our loved ones and one another, we would be beyond this.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And Leo, I don't want to just, we understand the problem with that gas station. Trust me, I walk by there often and I pick up trash there often. Happy to see actually last week, one of their own employees was out there picking up trash. But I think there's drug activity going there. It's yes, definitely sir. On our radar.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, folks, we've got one more question if it's out there for the mayor. Okay.
And Daniel, I would just ask, was this presentation helpful? I need to know
yes.
if people think it was helpful.
I think it was, Mayor. And, you know, even though we're in the middle of this pandemic and things seem to be getting worse, it doesn't mean that the work of governance stops, right? And we've got to keep the needle moving. You know, I think for us as a chamber, though, we remain concerned about our small businesses, especially our mom and pop, you know, restaurants and bars. You spoke about Strawberry Hill. Yeah. A number of those businesses are going to see tremendous impact to their revenues. And, you know, hopefully they can make it out, you know,
I did see that Schumer at least is reporting that that McConnell may be agreeable to do some kind of thing. I agree with McConnell. It needs to be targeted, and I think specifically to small and medium-sized businesses, in my opinion.
I agree. We're thankful for the $825,000 that went to small businesses in Wyandotte County. I think 60 plus businesses were able to tap into that, and hopefully in this next round, that number can be increased as well. They're going to need it.
Absolutely.
Well, Mayor, thank you very much for joining us and going a little over. Really appreciate your time. Thank you for your leadership.
Thank you all. Good to see you all.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.